You are listening to the IFH Podcast Network. For more amazing filmmaking and screenwriting podcasts, just go to ifhpodcastnetwork.com.
Welcome to the Successful Screenwriter Podcast, where we discuss anything and everything screenwriting. Here we interview successful screenwriters and filmmakers to find out just what it takes to make it in the industry. Just a heads up, this episode is brought to you by my book, The Guide for Every Screenwriter, which has been listed as one of the best screenwriting books of all time by the Book Authority. If you're looking for something that reveals the secrets of screenwriting in an easy to understand and engaging way, then this is the book for you. You can find The Guide for Every Screenwriter at thesuccessfulscreenwriter.com/books. Now, on to the show. All right, welcome to the show. We have on an awesome guest today. She has written a book called Editing for Directors. She's got over 30 years experience and has been on shows such as Family Matters. This is Gael Chandler. Gael, thanks for being on with us.
Thanks for having me.
I had the pleasure of reading this book, and I really like to try and know all facets of the film business, not just my little myopic view of screenwriting, because I think that allows me to be a better screenwriter. So with the show itself, I like to bring on guests that are experts in those different fields so that our screenwriters can get exposure to where they can maybe possibly grow as well. And also, I also recommend screenwriters go into their own filmmaking. So they should already know, if you're going to be a director, what it is that the editor does. And you're the perfect guest to come on.
Great.
So, Editing for Directors is a comprehensive book on the art and craft of editing. I mean, you have everything from the origin of editing to everything to, new software that they use nowadays for editing. So it's actually fascinating. And so before we really kind of get into this process, I want to get a little bit of your origin story that brought you into this.
Well, my origin story was I moved to LA in '79, and I actually wanted to write.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to write scripts. And I somehow, in my 20-year-old mind, I thought I had to learn the business to do that.
Okay.
And so I decided to, for me, I needed reality. I wanted the reality of filmmaking. And so I picked editing, and eventually did start writing scripts, but my career was really in editing. And I found they both helped each other.
Okay.
And so then I ended up in the early 90s, film and video, which was what editing was being performed on, came together in the digital world. So everybody had to learn digital editing systems. And I started training big editors on all types of projects, from student films to big features. Wow. On digital editing system. And out of that, I decided to, I thought it would be good to do online courses on editing. And that didn't happen. But what did happen was I crossed Michael Weezy's path, who was the publisher of the book. And this is my fourth book for them.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
Yeah. And this one actually, Michael Weezy actually proposed. And they they also have a cinematography for directors. And he thought editing was a niche that hadn't been talked about. And I agreed.
Well, I think it's really important because editing is storytelling. I mean, there's the old adage of you make a movie 3 times. You write the movie, you shoot the movie, you edit the movie. And so editing is definitely a form of storytelling. And what I really like in the book is that you cover that. I mean, you talk about things like flashbacks and flash forwards and the differences between that and how they can change your script or your film itself and really cause that kind of an impact.
Yes. And I mean, I think, to sort of paraphrase what you said, there's movie that's written, the movie that's shot, and the movie that's edited. And
Yeah.
I worked in a lot of sitcoms, and normally what was written was terrific, and what ended up on the screen was pretty close. But as we all know, every project, even a regular series, changes in the editing. And so that's why I think editing could really help people that are writing. It certainly did mine, because you have to think of where this is going to end up. No one goes to see the screenplay. They go to see what the screenplay turns into. And it makes you think about transitions. It makes you, as probably every scriptwriter has been told, when you go to somebody, an agent or a possible producer of your script, you want them to be running it in their head, your film in their head. So I think knowing all parts of filmmaking, like you said, are helpful, and especially editing, because an editing point of view to a certain extent is that it's all raw material until it goes out the editing room door. The editor does not see the 20 minutes it took to get an incredibly horrible shot that doesn't make it into the final cut. They don't see the script, but they do see what ends up on the screen, whether it's a little a little device or the big screen.
Interesting. I mean, it sounds like understanding editing, it'll make you a better visual storyteller, and make you more efficient as a writer, because you're able to really see what's happening on that back end, because the editor isn't getting the screenplay, they're getting the dailies. So they're going through and they're trying to piece together and weave this story. Now, I've seen a good actor save a bad line of dialogue through intonation or providing subtext where there was none. But I know with editing, you can even take dialogue or maybe a performance that isn't as spot on as it should be and even save that.
It's really true. When you're writing, it seems very clear and logical, but when you actually put it together, some stuff ends up being dropped, moved around, and so on. And sometimes, most parts of filmmaking are, as I call it, mundane and magical. And the mundane parts are really the technical. You may get the greatest sound take of an actor, but visually something goes wrong, or vice versa. So editors do what we call putting words in people's mouths.
Okay.
So you take an audio take from one take, and you marry it to a picture take. And it also avoids looping, and it makes it work. And if you know what you're doing, you can make it work. And you can also throw the line over somebody else. If it doesn't, you can't quite make it look like it's out of sync, or in sync rather, if that makes sense. And and I would also say, Geoffrey, that the editor actually gets the script. I mean, if you're hired on a big job, you're going to have the script ahead of time of being hired. And if you're on series, you're going to get it along with dailies. And you go by the script. Yeah, perfect. No, you absolutely, you definitely, and the first cuts tend to be exactly to script, of what was intended. And from there, then the director gets involved. And from there, things start to change.
So this is awesome. Thank you for this.
Sure.
Is the editor coming in earlier on the process with the script? I mean, is the director ever discussing with the editor what they're looking for, or are you waiting until after all the shots come in, but you have the script as at least a blueprint?
No, it depends on the project. But if you're on a TV series, and even if it's your first time you're on the series, you've gotten the script ahead of time. You're familiar with the show going in. A lot of the time. Sometimes you're not, if it's a totally new show. But definitely from if you're in the elite editors, you probably worked with the director, or you have a good reputation, and you're definitely going to see the script. And ideally, they're going to ask for input from you. They're going to ask for input from the sound editors. Awesome. Because this is all part of hearing the film. An editor writes with picture and sound,
Yeah.
and video effects, and graphics and text. So it's a lot to think about. And the sooner you can bring an editor in, I mean, the editors, like you said, one more storyteller.
Yeah. It's fascinating because I've always heard editors are kind of there to save the movie. And it's nice to see that editors can be brought in early on into the process instead of this afterthought of, okay, we have all this stuff. Some of it works, some of it doesn't. Let's fix it in post, throw it at the editor and see what comes out.
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of the times you have wonderful stuff and you're just putting it together, and you're really fortunate to do that. You're not always a fixer because you get good stuff.
So I've spoken with I've had the privilege of getting to know Alex Farrar, and he does a lot. He was known for editing, and he runs Indie Film Hustle, and he would tell me, I would edit these films so long I felt like I knew the actors because I would get used to all of their little mannerisms and all of their little performances. Is that ever something that you yourself would kind of run into?
Yeah, I mean, you're staring at their faces in all day. And, if you're on a series, you're staring at them for weeks or years, months. And you do feel like you know them. And then you go on set and you're just this little person off somewhere in the studio, and they have no idea who you are.
Yeah.
So yes, I've definitely had that.
Yeah, that's so interesting because you would be like watching this person for, day. I mean, I knew an editor who would close the windows, put up black shades, and take the clock out of the room, and then just spend like 3-4 days in an editing suite, almost like it was Vegas. You never knew what time it was, and so I could understand if you're just spending hours upon hours working, with the same type of actor, how that would be.
And by the way, Alex also interviewed me for his show.
So wonderful.
Yeah, it was like two editors nattering away. It was fun.
Well, great. I hope everybody checks that episode out as well. The Indie Film Hustle podcast is fantastic. So what kind of tips would you have, since you are a writer and you are an editor and you're able to take both of those together? What kind of tips do you have for the screenwriters out there to really make their process more efficient? Or if they're interested in looking at editing, because I know I myself, I edit this podcast, so it's a little bit different, but I had to learn a new skill, and it took a long time for me to figure it out. So what kind of suggestions do you have?
I think you want to think as visually as possible. One of my quips is a look from Meryl Streep is worth 1,000 lines of dialogue. And, silent films are kind of revered, and I don't think that's where we're going back to, but you really can say a lot with looks and reaction shots. And of course, that's not what you put in the screenplay.
Yeah.
You don't describe the shots. That's not your job, but you can write it so that people will see it.
Yeah.
And I think that's very important. And I think about sounds. And most of all, I think you just really want to create incredible characters that people relate to, that have heart and depth, and that you know everything you can about them.
Well, I think with the silent moments, I myself will, like, I just worked on a gig actually, and the director wanted a really huge, powerful moment where one of the characters is giving a big, speech to rile everyone up, felt like I was trying to write Braveheart. And I wrote the big speech and I was like, this doesn't work at all. And so I took the speech out and I had the character instead make an action, which inspired questions from the characters around them. Like, what is he doing? And then they got more invested in his approach. And I found that silent moment works. It allows the character to embody that moment and then drive conflict through interest. And I think there is definitely, like you said, there is power to that, because in real life, no one's going out there and giving that Braveheart speech. It's not happening. But we are all out here in real life and we are all struggling, right? We're all going through the human process, and that struggle can be very silent. And so I think when you infuse those moments into a real character, it definitely does make them feel more relatable and realistic. I think you're absolutely right.
I have a couple of things to say. I totally agree, of course. And one is that, and I talk about this in the book, sometimes it's more important, the words aren't as important as what the people are reacting to.
Yeah.
So if you have that big speech, it may be, somebody's exhorting somebody to go into battle. Maybe you want to cut around to the soldiers and the townspeople. Are they with this person, or are they saying, no way, we want peace, or we're protesting, or whatever? Maybe important to see what actions they're going to take and where that's going to lead the script. And then the other thing is, in editing, you become aware that a movie is like music to an extent.
Interesting.
There are rests, like there are silences.
Yeah.
Especially after big scenes, like Dorothy arrives in Oz and there's silence.
Yeah.
And then the music comes in. Jodie Foster lands on the planet after in Contact. When she first walks out, there is silence. And it's very typical after very intense battle scenes or marriage scenes, or
those quiet moments.
So it's very much like music, with rests and speeded up parts and chaos, and the rhythm of a screenplay will have a ripple effect on the shooting and the editing.
I think that's a fascinating point. The rhythm of a screenplay. I love that, because I think in a screenplay in like a wavelength of peaks and valleys. And I think you're absolutely spot on what you're saying. And a lot of people, when they're writing that screenplay, they're just trying to get it done. And then when they go back and they start rewriting it, they start tweaking it. When I go through that rewrite process, I'll do an entire rewrite of just what I call flow, the flow of the script. How is it reading? Is it reading easily? Am I visualizing it as I'm reading it? And that is part of that process of that rhythm. And it's such a beautiful way to express that. Now, I know there's, when directors are shooting, they'll do B-roll footage, right? They'll pick up B-roll footage. How important is that to you as a director or as an editor? Because as a screenwriter, we're not thinking that way. We're not thinking B-roll footage, pick up audience reactions and things like that.
I think B-roll has gotten more important through the years. If you watch current documentaries, it's really gotten more away from the talking head.
Yeah.
And the B-roll just serves to cover a lot of ground. Last night I watched The Inventor, Out for Blood, about Elizabeth Holmes, which I highly recommend. And
I've seen it.
I noticed it was from 2019, really, but I think they're probably running it now because her trial is underway.
Makes sense.
And but they played a lot of stuff over shots of being in the lab and machines.
Right. Yeah.
And, part of me is sort of like, well, don't you have the footage just on something more? But frankly, it works. We're used to music videos, which to me are just sort of background visuals for songs. I find most of them not gripping.
Right.
Hopefully the music is, but, and I think that's affected documentary.
It's a really interesting
okay
point.
People just show fields and run somebody talking. It has not that much to do with it. I just made up fields, but you know what I mean?
I get it.
I think but I think B-roll can, so it can serve to stitch a movie together, but it can be better than that. One of the things I talk about in the book is David Watkins, when he got the Oscar in, I think around 87 for Out of Africa. He said for the cinematography, people would come up to him and say, "Oh, I love that scene where the flamingos are flying and the plane's going over." And he said, that was second unit, that was B-roll. And this happened to him repeatedly. So he really gave credit. He did the principals. He did Redford and Streep. And That's what a cinematographer does, and that's how it works. But he was really, I love that he gave credit to the fact that the B-roll made such an important, played an important role.
Well, do you think it's because as society, we have become, instant with everything from getting your food to communication online with your phone? Do you think it's just because attention spans have shortened that we can't really have those talking heads anymore where you're just watching somebody be interviewed for 3 minutes? Instead, we have to intercut several, B-roll footage or, stock photos or stock video if you're a lower budget thing to just keep the audience interested in the show.
Yeah, I think one of the things I put in the book, and there have been other studies, but the main one I talk about is the Cornell study from about 10 years ago. And they measured average shot lengths.
Interesting.
And they took films from, I believe it was the so-called golden Hollywood age. And they went from, I think, the 30s to the 80s.
Yeah.
And they looked at the average shot length of feature films. And they showed that they have, as you would expect, have declined over the years.
Yeah.
And especially with thrillers and those kind of movies. And they predicted that it would only continue.
Isn't that interesting? So it makes you wonder, like, how quick are scenes going to be in the future now if they're already down to like 1 to 3 minutes is considered a long scene, Well, what a great book. And you guys got to get a little bit of a sample here on the show. Editing for Directors. It is a really good read. It is totally comprehensive. Gives you everything you need to know about editing. I strongly recommend it. Gail, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe and share on your social media where you can tag us at The Successful Screenwriter.